The world of the NFL greatness is on display every Sunday, but for some superstars, the fall from grace is a catastrophic plunge that no one ever sees coming. Consider the chilling case of Kellen Winslow II, a man convicted for a series of horrific crimes targeting women. While Winslow was found guilty of monstrous acts like rape and indecent exposure, Henry Ruggs III's name is synonymous with the deadly crash he caused while drunk. The promising career of Henry Ruggs III was obliterated in the twisted metal of a fatal collision where he was immediately expected to face felony charges for driving under the influence. They traded their helmets for prison jumpsuits. These are the former NFL players now serving hard time behind bars, beginning with Chad Wheeler. Chad Wheeler was once a colossal offensive tackle, a dominant force on the line for USC in his college days before advancing to the pros with the New York Giants and Seattle Seahawks. Born on January 19, 1994, Wheeler was celebrated as a premier prospect straight out of high school, eventually earning a first-team All-Pac-12 selection at USC. But even then, shadows loomed over his future. His collegiate years were a brutal war against injuries, including numerous concussions and a catastrophic ACL tear in 2014 that destroyed his draft stock. There was also a deeply disturbing incident in 2015 which prompted a police response to a volatile situation. The confrontation became so dangerously out of control that officers were forced to subdue him with beanbag rounds before he was ultimately placed under a psychiatric hold. Despite the mountain of red flags, Wheeler still managed to force his way into the NFL in 2017 as an undrafted free agent. The New York Giants took a gamble on him and he worked his way into the rotation, eventually becoming a starter at right tackle in 2018. After his persistent injuries led the Giants to waive him in 2019, Wheeler landed on the Seattle Seahawks practice squad before clawing his way back to the active roster. He played sparingly throughout the 2020 season, but in January of 2021, Chad Wheeler's football career came to a sudden and violent end. On January 23, 2021, inside an apartment in Kent, Washington, Wheeler unleashed a barbaric assault upon his girlfriend in a terrifying act of domestic violence. According to official law enforcement documents, the savage attack took place entirely within the walls of Wheeler's own residence. His victim miraculously fled to a bathroom to make a desperate 911 call, telling dispatchers she was certain he was going to kill her. When police arrived, they found Wheeler standing near the scene, reporting that he appeared eerily composed and compliant in the aftermath of such violence. Wheeler was arrested and faced a slew of felony charges: first-degree domestic violence assault, unlawful imprisonment, and resisting arrest. He was released on a $400,000 bond soon after, only to be immediately cut by the Seattle Seahawks. Wheeler then issued a public statement claiming he was stepping away from the game to seek help, but the wheels of justice were already in motion. He entered a plea of not guilty on February 1, 2021, initiating a long and arduous court battle that finally went to trial in 2023. On November 9, 2023, the verdict was delivered. A King County jury declared Chad Wheeler guilty of domestic violence assault. The court found that his brutal attack had inflicted substantial bodily harm, and prosecutors successfully argued that the graphic details merited a felony-level conviction. For his crimes, Wheeler received a sentence of 6.5 years in prison. He is currently an inmate in the Washington State Penal System. Next, we turn to another NFL player whose decision to drive drunk unleashed an unimaginable horror: Henry Ruggs III. He was a former star wide receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders whose NFL career lasted only 2 seasons before it was extinguished by a prison sentence. Born on January 24, 1999, Ruggs grew up in the city of Montgomery, Alabama. In high school, he was an explosive, raw athlete, clocking a stunning 10.58 seconds in the 100-meter dash and attracting more than 20 college offers after just 2 years of playing football. He chose to play for Alabama, where he was forged into one of the most feared and explosive receivers in the entire nation, finishing his college run with 24 touchdowns, the 3rd highest total in the school's legendary history. Ruggs entered the 2020 NFL Draft as one of the most prized wideouts available, and he proceeded to run a blistering 4.27-second 40-yard dash at the Combine. The Raiders were so impressed they drafted him 12th overall, making him the very first receiver selected that year. His rookie year showed flashes of his breathtaking potential, and through 7 games in 2021, he had already racked up 469 receiving yards. But his life and career came to a devastating halt on November 2, 2021 at approximately 3:39 a.m. In Spring Valley, Nevada. Ruggs was behind the wheel of a Corvette with his girlfriend in the passenger seat. Police later confirmed he was traveling at an unbelievable 156 miles per hour just seconds before impact. A blood sample taken 2 hours after the collision registered his blood alcohol content at 0.161%, more than double Nevada's legal limit. Ruggs's car then slammed into the rear of a Toyota RAV4 being driven by 23-year-old Tina Tintor. The collision was so violent that the SUV immediately erupted into a massive fireball. Tina Tintor and her dog were trapped inside the inferno and died at the scene. Ruggs and his girlfriend, however, managed to survive the crash with non-life-threatening injuries. After being discharged from the hospital, Ruggs was immediately taken into custody at the Clark County Detention Center and charged with DUI resulting in death and reckless driving. The Raiders released him that very same day. During the initial court proceedings, Ruggs's defense team fought to have the crucial blood test evidence thrown out. This legal challenge worried prosecutors who feared that if the evidence was suppressed, Ruggs could potentially evade the DUI felony charge entirely, so they pushed for a plea deal. In the end, Ruggs pleaded guilty to one felony count of DUI resulting in death, as well as a misdemeanor for vehicular manslaughter. On August 9, 2023, Henry Ruggs was sentenced to serve 3 to 10 years in a Nevada state prison. He will first become eligible for parole in 2026. And now we delve into the dark story of an NFL player convicted for a horrifying series of crimes targeting women. His name is Kellen Winslow II, a former star tight end for the NFL who now resides behind prison walls. Born in San Diego, California, he was the son of a football legend, the Hall of Fame tight end Kellen Winslow. At the University of Miami, his college football career was nothing short of spectacular. He was a unanimous All-American and won the John Mackey Award, recognized as the best tight end in the nation. He made the decision to go pro, declaring for the 2004 NFL Draft, where he was snatched up as the 6th overall pick by the Cleveland Browns. Winslow's professional career saw him play for the Browns, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the New England Patriots, and the New York Jets, earning a Pro Bowl selection in 2007. Yet his time in the NFL was plagued by devastating injuries, including a broken leg and a torn ACL sustained in a motorcycle crash. His last official game was in 2013, though he made a couple of short-lived comeback attempts in 2017 and 2018. But a different, more sinister chapter of his life began in 2014 when he faced his first charges for drug possession. The real downward spiral started in June of 2018 when he was arrested in San Diego County, accused of breaking into a mobile home park with the intent to commit burglary. Just days after that arrest, he was taken into custody again, this time on charges that were far more terrifying, including kidnapping and assault. The prosecution painted a chilling picture, accusing Winslow of preying on the most vulnerable women he could find, from the homeless to the elderly. In a shocking separate case, he was charged with assaulting a 17-year-old girl who was unconscious back in 2003 when he was just 19. Winslow managed to post bail, but his freedom was short-lived. He was dragged back into custody when a new wave of charges crashed down on him in 2019 for lewd conduct, indecent exposure, and the battery of an elderly woman. His first trial concluded in June of 2019. He was found guilty of mistreatment, indecent exposure, and committing a lewd act. The jury was deadlocked on the other counts, resulting in a mistrial. Then in November of 2019, Winslow decided to accept a plea bargain. He admitted his guilt in the assault of the unconscious 17-year-old and to the battery of a 54-year-old woman he had picked up while she was hitchhiking. This plea deal was the only thing that saved him from a potential life sentence. In 2021, the final judgment came down. Winslow was sentenced to 14 years in prison for his multitude of crimes, assault chief among them. His legal team tried to argue that his actions were the result of brain trauma, possibly CTE from his football career, but the argument failed to sway the court. As of 2023, Kellen Winslow II remains incarcerated at the California Shitties Correctional Institution in Tehachapi, California, where he is paying his debt to society. But the darkness doesn't end there. Our next story involves an NFL player now serving a life sentence for plotting the murder of a millionaire. His name is Eric Naposki, a former linebacker in the NFL and the World League. Born in Tuckahoe, New York, he played high school football at several different schools before his talent earned him a scholarship to the University of Connecticut. He stormed off the team after a clash with the coaching staff, but he eventually came back to finish his degree. In 1988, he entered the NFL as an undrafted free agent with brief stints playing for the New England Patriots, the Indianapolis Colts, the New York Jets, and the Dallas Cowboys. The majority of his professional achievements, however, came from his time in the World League of American Football, where he spent 4 seasons with the Barcelona Dragons, even helping them clinch the 1997 World Bowl championship. On the night of December 15, 1994, inside the supposed safety of his gated Newport Beach mansion, Bill McLaughlin was brutally murdered. For 15 long years, the murder remained a cold case. Then in 2009, investigators tracked down Naposki in Connecticut and arrested him, charging him with the murder. The prosecution laid out a stunning conspiracy, alleging that Naposki was the triggerman in a plot orchestrated with McLaughlin's girlfriend Nanette Johnston, who was also Naposki's secret lover. The motive was pure cold-blooded greed. Johnston was positioned to inherit more than $2.5 million from McLaughlin's life insurance policy and his savings upon his death. Prosecutors argued that Johnston had woven a web of deceit controlling McLaughlin's finances and living in his lavish home, all while carrying on a hidden affair with Naposki. The evidence placed Naposki just a few hundred yards from the murder scene, working as a bouncer, which gave him the perfect access and opportunity to strike. But the entire case rested on a precarious web of circumstance. The murder weapon was never recovered. There were no fingerprints, no DNA evidence, and not a single eyewitness to the crime. Despite this, in July of 2011, a jury in Orange County delivered its verdict. Naposki was guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances for financial gain and the personal use of a firearm. He was facing the death penalty, but the prosecution chose not to pursue it. In August of 2012, he was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of ever walking free. Johnston was also convicted for her role in the plot and received the exact same sentence. To this day, Naposki has never wavered, insisting he is an innocent man. His appeals have centered on the argument that the 15-year delay before charges were filed destroyed evidence that could have proven his alibi. But in 2014, the appellate court shot down his appeal, finding no errors in the trial that would justify overturning his conviction. Today, Eric Naposki is locked away at California State Prison Corcoran, serving out his life sentence with absolutely no possibility of parole. Coming up, we expose an NFL player who masterminded a massive fraud scheme, Robert McCoon. Robert McCoon is a former NFL linebacker who is now serving a 5-year federal prison sentence for orchestrating a colossal healthcare fraud that ensnared dozens of other former NFL players. McCoon, who was born in Mobile, Alabama, was a dual-sport athlete in both football and track at LaFleur High School. After leaving high school, he put in 3 years of service with the U.S. National Guard, including tours in Korea and Kuwait. His path then led him to play college football for Louisville, where he solidified his role as a 2-year starter at middle linebacker and racked up all-conference accolades. The NFL came calling in 2005 when the Washington Redskins selected Munn in the 5th round of the draft. While he spent the bulk of his first year on the practice squad, he saw action in 5 regular season matchups and 2 playoff contests, making his mark mostly on special teams. The years that followed saw him become a journeyman, moving between the Miami Dolphins, Baltimore Ravens, and Cleveland Browns, but he seldom saw any significant time on the field. When his prospects in the NFL dried up, he extended his career in the Canadian Football League, playing for both the Calgary Stampeders and the Toronto Argonauts. In Toronto, he rose to become a powerhouse leader on defense, and was a key part of the team's victory in the 100th Grey Cup in 2012. But years after his cleats were hung up, McCoon's life took a dark and criminal turn. Between June of 2017 and April of 2018, he masterminded a sweeping healthcare fraud preying on the Gene Upshaw NFL Player Health Reimbursement Account Plan. This fund was established as a lifeline meant to cover medical bills for retired NFL players and their families. And McCoon bombarded the plan with 68 phony claims for high-priced medical equipment, including things like hyperbaric oxygen chambers, ultrasound machines, and electromagnetic therapy devices. Not a single piece of that equipment ever existed. He also filed claims on behalf of 51 other former players, a great number of whom had no idea and certainly never received the equipment listed. In the end, Munn and his accomplices attempted to bleed the plan for roughly $2.9 million. Federal agents eventually unraveled the conspiracy, and on December 12, 2019, Munn was indicted for wire fraud, healthcare fraud, and conspiracy. He initially proclaimed his innocence, but as the evidence mounted, he changed his tune. In September 2021, he admitted guilt on all counts, including aggravated identity theft. By February 2022, Munn's fate was sealed 5 years in federal prison. While 13 other former players were caught in the legal fallout, McCoon was identified as the ringleader who orchestrated and submitted the overwhelming majority of the fraudulent claims. Robert Munn is currently serving his time behind bars in federal prison. The stories, however, grow even darker. We now turn to an NFL player who took his girlfriend's life in a manner no one could have foreseen. Kevin Ware Jr. He is a former NFL tight end who once played for the Washington Redskins and the San Francisco 49ers. He wasn't a household name, but he made it to the league, appearing in 16 NFL games and getting a brief taste of the dream. But away from the stadium lights, his life was a downward spiral into a vortex of violence, drugs, and eventually murder. Ware's criminal history, however, started long before he committed the ultimate crime. Back in 2002, while he was still playing college football for the University of Washington, he pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault. After his short-lived NFL career flamed out, his brushes with the law became more frequent and more serious. In 2010, he was hit with charges of theft and evading arrest following an assault. Then in 2018, he was handed a 2-year prison sentence for possession of a controlled substance with intent to deliver. But 2021 was the year the situation exploded. On April 19, 2021, police pulled Ware over in Magnolia, Texas. What they found in his car was a chilling cash drugs, a loaded AK-47, and a loaded 9mm pistol. As a convicted felon, he was legally barred from owning any firearms. He was arrested and charged, but incredibly, he was out on bond the very next day. Less than a month later, his girlfriend, 29-year-old Taylor Pomaski, disappeared. Neighbors later recalled a vicious fight erupting at a party the couple had thrown on April 25th. After that night, no one ever saw Taylor Pomaski alive again. Ware instantly became the prime suspect, a fact cemented when he violated his bail and was arrested again in June. After months of searching, on December 10, 2021, investigators made a gruesome discovery in northern Harris County: human remains. They had been horrifically burned. DNA testing confirmed the nightmare. It was Taylor Pomaski. In July 2022, Ware was indicted for her murder and for tampering with her body. Prosecutors then revealed the full, sickening brutality of her death. She had been bludgeoned with a blunt object before her body was burned. Ware remained in jail on the earlier charges while the murder case against him was built. In May of 2025, he finally confessed, pleading guilty to murdering Pomaski. In a deal to avoid a life sentence, he accepted a term of 30 years in state prison. Our next case involves a former NFL player who ran a different kind of destructive playbook, one of elaborate schemes and multiple crimes. John Robert Leake. He is a former NFL linebacker who had brief tenures with the Tennessee Titans, Atlanta Falcons, and Green Bay Packers. Leake's story began in Plano, Texas. He played his college ball at Clemson from 2000 to 2003 before entering the NFL as an undrafted free agent in 2004. He spent his time on practice squads, seeing action in just a handful of games between 2005 and 2006. Once his football career was over, Leake reinvented himself as a businessman, a path that would lead him straight into a world of fraud. From June 2015 to March 2020, Leake constructed an elaborate multi-year Ponzi scheme, seducing his victims with promises of astronomical profits. He sold them lies about his involvement in high-yield ventures, including luxury, real estate rental properties, and even gold mining operations in Alaska and Ghana. The devastating truth was that none of these ventures ever existed. Leake masterfully manipulated his victims, persuading them to hand over staggering amounts of cash with the promise of incredible returns on their investment. He built a fantasy world, claiming he had millions of his own skin in the game, that he was a wildly successful investor, and that he possessed the assets to cover every last penny. To sell the lie, he even provided investors with official-looking promissory notes guaranteeing their money back with lucrative fixed interest rates. But the moment their money was in his hands, the investments vanished into thin air. He funneled their life savings directly into his own pockets, bankrolling a lavish lifestyle, paying off credit cards, rent car notes, and fueling his gambling addiction. In a classic Ponzi scheme maneuver, he would peel off some of the newly stolen money to make phony interest payments to his earliest victims, keeping the illusion of success alive just long enough to lure in the next target. All told, Leake swindled more than $8.1 million from 6 unsuspecting victims. He left a trail of financial ruin amounting to over $5.3 million in real losses, all built on a foundation of pure fiction. The federal government finally caught up, charging him with wire fraud and money laundering. In January 2025, a federal judge brought the hammer down, sentencing him to 30 months behind bars and ordering him to repay $5,314,050 in restitution. But now, we turn to an NFL star whose crimes were not against wallets, but against the bodies and souls of young women. Darren Sharper. A name once synonymous with greatness, now forever tainted. He was a former NFL safety, a 14-season veteran who played for the Green Bay Packers, the Minnesota Vikings, and the New Orleans Saints. A 5-time Pro Bowler, a 2-time first-team All-Pro. Sharper was a legend, ranking 6th all-time in interceptions and tied for the most defensive touchdowns in the history of the league. Sharper's journey began in Virginia, where he was a phenom on the football field and in the classroom at Hermitage High School. At William and Mary, he shattered school records with 24 career interceptions and over 1,000 punt return yards. The Green Bay Packers drafted him in the second round of the 1997 NFL Draft, and he quickly became one of the most dominant defensive backs in the game, his career culminating in a Super Bowl victory with the Saints in 2010. But away from the roar of the crowd, a monster was lurking. Starting in 2011, Sharper began a horrifying spree, preying on multiple women at parties and nightclubs and inside private homes across California, Arizona, Louisiana, and Nevada. His weapon of choice was a toxic cocktail of prescription sedatives and alcohol. He would drug his victims until they were completely incapacitated, making it nearly impossible for them to identify their attacker or for justice to be served. The official investigation uncovered at least 9 victims, but authorities believe the true number could be as high as 16. Sharper didn't act alone. His crimes were aided by accomplices Brandon Licciardi and Eric Nunez, who helped him assault these women. Both men were ultimately convicted, their lengthy prison sentences running concurrently with Sharper's. In 2014, the law finally closed in. Sharper was arrested facing a mountain of charges across multiple states. From aggravated assault to conspiracy to distribute drugs, he eventually pleaded guilty or no contest in California, Arizona, Louisiana, and Nevada. The sentences were staggering: 20 concurrent years in state prison, and another 18 years and 4 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release and a $20,000 fine. He is now a registered offender, mandated to undergo treatment for the rest of his life. Sharper's horrific crimes didn't just end a career, they erased a legacy. He had a brief stint as an analyst for WWL-TV and the NFL Network, but that was all wiped away by his arrest. Once hailed as one of the NFL's all-time defensive titans, Sharper is now just a convicted serial predator locked away at FCI Elkton with a release date not scheduled until late 2028. Next, the story of an NFL player now serving time for the brutal murder of a 5-year-old child. Cierre Wood, a former NFL running back whose incredible promise on the field ended in an unthinkable tragedy and a criminal conviction that shocked the nation. After a spectacular career at Notre Dame, Wood's time in the NFL was a turbulent journey, bouncing between the Houston Texans, New England Patriots, Baltimore Ravens, Seattle Seahawks, and Buffalo Bills. He also played in the Canadian Football League for the Hamilton Tiger Cats and the Montreal Alouettes. Wood's story began in Oxnard, California, where he was a force of nature at Santa Clara High School. In his junior year alone, he annihilated defenses, rushing for over 2,600 yards and scoring 34 touchdowns. He was a USA Today All-American, one of the most sought-after recruits in the country, ultimately choosing Notre Dame over a host of powerhouse programs. At Notre Dame, he exploded onto the scene, becoming the starting running back in 2011 and charging for over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. But cracks began to show. Off-field problems surfaced, leading to a 2-game suspension in 2012 for breaking team rules. After declaring for the 2013 NFL Draft, Wood's name was never called. He went undrafted, eventually signing as a free agent with the Houston Texans. His professional career was a constant struggle, marked by repeated cuts and stints on practice squads. The explosive talent he showed in high school and college never fully materialized in the pros, and a devastating torn ACL with the Bills effectively shattered his prospects for good. But then in 2019, Cierre Wood's life spiraled into a darkness from which there was no return. On April 10, 2019, Las Vegas police arrested him and his girlfriend Amy Taylor in connection with the death of Taylor's 5-year-old daughter, Lariah Davis. The details that emerged were stomach-churning. Investigators revealed the little girl's body was covered in extreme bruising and trauma, the result of horrific physical abuse and being forced to endure torturous exercise routines as punishment for being overweight. The community was left reeling, unable to reconcile the image of a professional athlete with the monstrous cruelty inflicted upon an innocent child. Back in 2024, a man named Wood pled to second-degree murder and child abuse. He was handed a life sentence, but with a chance of parole after just 12 years and 4 months. But that sentence is nothing compared to the staggering 41 years our next NFL player is serving for running a massive drug empire. We're talking about Daryl Henley. Daryl Keith Henley was on a trajectory to greatness. He was a force of nature for the Los Angeles Rams, a celebrated quarterback whose raw talent at UCLA had already crowned him a consensus All-American in 1988. Snapped up in the second round of the 1989 NFL Draft, Henley immediately became a cornerstone of the Rams' defense, playing in 76 games and snatching 12 interceptions. But the life Henley lived off the field would soon cast a dark shadow over everything he achieved on it. In the early 1990s, Henley found himself entangled in the web of a coast-to-coast drug trafficking operation. From his home in Brea, California, he exploited his own celebrity to lure in accomplices, including a former Ram cheerleader named Tracy Dano, who became his courier, moving suitcases filled with narcotics across the United States. His descent into the criminal underworld ultimately cost him the last 11 games of the 1993 season, though he shockingly still pocketed his $600,000 salary. He made a brief court-supervised return to the Rams in 1994, but his contract was never renewed. Where a multi-million-dollar deal should have been, there was only a catastrophic legal nightmare. Then in March of 1995, the hammer fell. Henley and 4 of his co-conspirators, one of whom was his own uncle, were convicted on charges of drug conspiracy and possession. It was the moment that sealed his fate, transforming an NFL icon into a convicted felon. But while he was locked up in a Los Angeles jail awaiting his sentence, Henley's crimes escalated to a terrifying new level. The authorities made a horrifying discovery. He was plotting the murders of his own trial judge, Gary L. Taylor, and the star witness, Tracy Dano. He was orchestrating the entire hit from his cell, having bribed a prison guard to smuggle in a phone. The audacity of Henley's plot sent shockwaves through the justice system, revealing a man who had become far more menacing behind bars than he ever was on the outside. In a series of federal hearings in March 1997, Henley received his final sentence, 41 years and 3 months. He was designated for maximum security prisons, a sentence ensuring he wouldn't see the outside world again until he was well into his 60s. Judge James Eidemann didn't mince words, labeling Henley a hardened criminal who required 24-hour lockdown. Assistant U.S. attorneys acknowledged the sentence's severity but declared it entirely justified, considering the breathtaking scale and arrogance of his crimes. What are your thoughts on this shocking fall from grace? Share them in the comments below. And if you found this story compelling, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to NFL Rivals so you never miss another incredible story.